Yes, hello, folks. Welcome to the weekly Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, as always, joined with my regular co-host, the excellent James Rhodes. Tuesday here. Of course, we didn't record last week because it was international break. We weren't able to record yesterday. It's Thanksgiving here, week in the US, so all our kids are off. So it's been hard trying to find a bit of peace and quiet. But here we are, nonetheless. How have you been, yet?
Yeah. Dealing with all of that and the holidays and end of year and work and everything, but it's good for football to be back. And we say it every time, but it does feel like every international break is like the longest thing ever. And the last one, it definitely felt like more. It was like it's kind of like waiting for Christmas, when you're a kid and you're waiting for when you're looking forward to it. We've had international breaks where it's been so miserable. I've like hoped it's not coming back, and I felt like this relief to not be watching on the weekend. But yeah, I mean, when you're looking forward to the game and to the things happening, you almost want them. Makes it feel a lot longer, and then all of that. But it's good. It's good otherwise.
Yes, and obviously it was a greatly anticipated return from the international break. Obviously, with Ruben Amorim's appointment, number of things that had happened since then. Felt like the longest international break ever.
Yeah.
But 1-1 away to Ipswich. Some bit disappointing in the sense that you hoped United would win the game. There was really a lot of the game was a dose of reality about, yes, we're excited about Amorim, but the reasons why he's here, you can still see on the field.
Oh yeah.
I thought he was very composed, very measured in his press conference before and after. Explained a lot of the things in the way you'd want them explained. But there was
Yep.
a few things that stood out. We'll talk about those in the press conference comments after we talk about the game. What do you think about the game?
Yeah, it was not that different to what I expected, even if not as good as what you'd hope. You know what I mean? Like when you balance the expectations of hope and reality of what you're looking at,
Mhm.
you can. It's really interesting because with Van Nistelrooy coming in for that brief period, you got kind of that emotional response, right, from the players, which you can see as a good thing, sometimes see as a bad thing. This like emotional relief, this emotional release where they kind of kept doing the same things they were doing, but maybe with a bit more energy and a bit more heart into it, a bit more freedom and all of that. And so you got some results. And you look at a manager like Amarim coming in, and you might expect to see more of that it's going to be even better. But I think what we saw was, which we'll get to the quotes afterwards, but my biggest takeaway from the game was really two things. Number one was very much the overthinking aspect of it that you're going to see, because he's trying to do something very different. It was kind of obvious to the players. They were trying to do something very different. Now you look at that as well, opposed to an Ipswich team that is coached by an excellent manager in Kieran
Mhm.
McKenna, who's been there for almost 4 years now, and has brought them up double promotion. Done some really really good stuff. 3 years, I think it was, right, about 3 years. Yeah,
Yeah.
has done some excellent thing. They're very well drilled, very well organized, very good on the same page. They don't have the player quality to compete at the top of the Premier League. If they did, we would have lost that game, because certainly they could have scored some more goals. Um, Onana was really good, amazing. And I think it's important to point it out because obviously, you know, with goalkeepers, but with Onana, a lot of heat when it doesn't go well, has gotten
Mhm.
probably not enough praise for just how good he's been in this season and recently as well. He was exceptional, in all aspects of it. He was praised by Amarim for it, who I love the frankness of him admitting they lose without Onana making those saves, and that's why it wasn't
Mhm.
very good. He was great. Um, but a lot of confusion, a lot of confusion. You could see it. Players taking a long time to make their decisions, a long time to do things, and good players too, smart players, guys like Matthias de Ligt, guys like Johnny Evans, guys like well, we've seen it from Dallo before, but regardless, there's a number of players who looked really confused, and that I think is confusion in a manner of they're obviously trying to do something new. And like you said, 2.5, 2 days, two training sessions, some one training session after the international break. the team selection as well was, I think, 5 of the selections were purely based on fitness and returning from international break. You could see he couldn't wait to get, Shaw and Ugarte on the pitch. I think we were way better as soon as he was able to make some of those changes, get those players who obviously he wasn't sure about their fitness to start the game because of travel or all of that, and he replaced 2 of the older players in Casemiro and Evans, who I think physically were struggling with the pace of the game, with the energy levels that were needed, with the spaces. And that's probably something we're going to see. I think it's going to be really difficult. I'm not saying there isn't a place for Casemiro because he's shown us a few times that he can. And he's a very intelligent player. Obviously, he's won everything, but I think certainly we're going to see that need for, players like Ugarte who have bundles of energy, especially in these key areas in the midfield and the back line. It's unfamiliar territory. So that was a lot of it. Confusion, there was the excitement where you saw, like, in a brief instant, in that first 90 seconds, that, Ahmad runs down the wing, beats some players, gets that cross in. And by the way, that was straight off the training ground. I mean, that was a pattern that they learned, and they were able to do it right off the bat and score. But it's really hard to sustain that, to work out how you continue to do that and problem solve when you haven't got that much experience. So that's what I saw is a lot of unfamiliarity. That you saw them try to do the same thing on the other side with Garnacho and Dallo, and they couldn't get the timings right very often. So mostly it was that. I saw players trying, which he said trying, but not there. And you wouldn't expect them to after such a short amount of time.
Were you surprised they left Ugarte on the bench?
No, I was hoping he wouldn't, but he took basically no risks, right, with the fitness aspects, didn't he? When you look at the player selection, Ugarte flew back, I think, on an overnight flight Wednesday night in, a little bit of training, that big travel from South America. But when he came on, he looked like he'd been playing as he should. Looked like he knows. He was one of the few. He looked instantly like he knew exactly what Emram wanted, which he should, and kind of directing traffic, moving things around, and looked a lot better. I think it was fitness. I mean, Kobbie Mainoo didn't play at all. He's been training all week, and we know how highly rated he is. It's fitness. Mount got very small amount of time, and he got a lot of praise from him during the week. Really, nobody returning from injury or who had traveled late, I think, where he had choices was starting. I think De Ligt, Dallo, and Mazraoui had to, because we had nobody else healthy. I mean, Maguire wasn't on the bench, Lissandra wasn't on the bench, Yoro wasn't on the bench. So in the back line, they had to start, but otherwise no risks really with any of the players where they hadn't had a lot of time.
Yeah, obviously, I would imagine we'll see Yoro probably very least on the bench against Bodo Glimt. It all depends on his fitness. I'm sure we'll see some of Kobbie Mainoo. And I thought some of his comments were quite interesting about Dallo, overlapping, going through the midfield, and now his responsibility is to hold his position. I understand why teams do that, because it's hard to pick up runners from deep. And so, Dallo was very good at making that run from deep, ball over the top. He just wasn't very good at finishing.
Yeah, he got in position for it even again in that game. And
yes, I know. And so, I think what happens is, when you talk about systems, 4-4-2, 3-4-3, 3-4-3, all this, what it doesn't really tell you much. What tells you that is the instructions they're told to execute within that system.
Exactly.
That's really the difference, right? I mean, when you say 4-4-2, do you mean in possession or out of possession? Do you mean how exactly is that, being played? And it's the execution of the instructions within that system are what makes a system. And obviously, when you're doing anything for the first time and you haven't mastered the skill and it's not natural, it's not, you do overthink every step, because you're trying to get things right. It's whenever that becomes natural to you and you don't have to think, then of course you have mastery. So I understood what Amorim was saying about players overthinking, and naturally you revert back to your bad habits. You can see some of that happening, and that's just going to take time. And so I think that he was very. I like the fact that he had mentioned Dallo. He had mentioned the fact about Johnny Evans needing to step out, and Ten Hag done that a bit. I remember Johnny Evans after the Burnley game last season saying that before it, saying that was new. He was the first time he'd ever had to step out as a centre back up into that defensive midfield position. But it's slightly different the way Amorim's asking him to do it. So, these are things that are going to take time. These are things that, for real substantive change, happens over time.
Correct. Yeah.
Even if United had won this game 5-0, James, it wouldn't have been indicative of anything. It doesn't reflect meaningful change. It's a bit gimmicky, So
Correct. Yeah.
you shouldn't expect to see, massive change in the first game. It's going to take a period of time. I think it was in Klopp's first season. He came in at Liverpool in October.
6 draws or something in the first 10
They had
games,
that
something like
infamous,
that.
celebration in front of fans, and there was a draw at home to Palace or something.
Yeah.
So I did Guardiola lose his first game in Barcelona? I think he did. So anyway, this stuff takes time.
Yeah.
And we've seen United managers come in, win their first game, everything looks amazing, and then it falls apart. So, United did not play well. They started well. Ipswich are a decent team. They went and beat Spurs before the
who've beaten City twice in a row now. So that's
So this is one. I actually remember I mistakenly thought the fixture was at home, so I thought United would win, and then when I realized it wasn't, it's like, you know what, this is actually a really tricky game, and some positives in that performance. But one of the other things that I felt was really beneficial when Amorim said, look, we're going to start from day one committed to the style of play that I want to play. Yes, we can play to win games, and we might win a few games, but we'll still be in the same position a year from now.
Yeah.
I think that was a consequence of some of the things that he was told in the interview process. What they were frustrated the most about with Ten Hag is that they didn't have an identity of playing style. Yeah. So he committed to it to day one. One of the reasons why I think that's important, James, is because players will know today exactly where they stand and what's expected from them. So one of the issues that players have had in the past is, I'm not going to name any names, but this is your position, and then a year later it gets changed, and you got to do it, and you got to do this, and so that's for players. It's okay. If I don't like what this guy's asking me to do today, or I know this is exactly where I'm going to be a year from now.
Yep,
I think that's very, very important.
Yeah, and on the other side, it also holds players accountable too, right? Because there's the support of the players, that continuity and knowing what's expected of you. We've talked about that quite a lot on this podcast, that it's really, really hard to work in an environment where you don't know what's expected of you, and you don't know what success or failure looks like for your performance, for your position, for your job, for your role, and you can't figure it out. Alternatively, it's like, if you have got kids, you'll know this happens, right? And it's where you have to be inflexible. You tell them, do the dishes, and they do a shit job of the dishes because they don't want to do the dishes, and they're going to try to get away with not doing the dishes.
They actually tried to do them. What are you doing now, Jamesy? I'm fucking RPGs with my kids, and they're still defiant. They're not doing no dishes.
Yeah, my 5-year-old is still small enough that he knows he's got to listen. So we'll see as he gets older.
Wash the dishes.
Oh yeah. I got him doing a lot of things.
Jesus Christ!
He's got to work. He's got to work. But no, look, I mean, it's the same in a job and stuff, and people do it all the time. If you're asked to do something and you don't want to do it, you're gonna fuck it up. And if the part of my language, but if the person in charge is flexible with that and lets you get away with it and changes and says, oh, well, I guess we can't do that, I guess we'll do something else, you breed a culture of people just knowing they can get away with not doing things. And so there's a dual aspect to this: motivation, consistency, and applicability. You know what I mean? And and holding them accountable. And so I think it works in both directions. This is my job. I got to do it. I got to do it well. I know what success looks like. I'm not going to get away with not doing it. So if I don't want to do it, or I can't do it, then I got to go find another place to play football.
Yeah.
And that works. That's good for everybody.
whatever position you're in life, you have to know what's expected of you. You have to
Yeah.
know this is where success is and this is where failure is.
Yeah.
And so when you have players that are scoring goals that get dropped or get pulled off, or some players playing well and then they get left out, or players that haven't been playing well for a year, all of a sudden, or you never get dropped. It's really confusing with that level of
Yeah.
communication. What is expected of me?
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of problems in between that space where people get really, there's a lot of things lost in communication, lost in
Yes.
interpretation that never leads to positive outcomes. So this is also a responsibility of Ineos. I hate to say this, James. I'm gonna have to drag these words out of my mouth. When you look at how well Liverpool are run as an institution, where you can have a manager walk in, seamlessly transition, follow
Mm-hmm.
a legend, and have every department functioning the way it should to support the manager and continue to win like that, that is an exceptionally well-run organization. That has to be where Ineos, the goal, not saying you have to copy Liverpool, but you have to copy
Right.
the model of a
It's
football
an
club.
it's an example.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's the only way a coach can succeed. If Slot had came to United in the summer, we would be looking at a whole different set of
Yeah.
results.
Yeah.
So, so this is also a responsibility of Ineos's to provide Amorim with the football club that can be managed. I like the playing style that Amorim's trying to implement. I think that one of the biggest challenges that he's going to have is how does he get goals out of this front line?
Mm-hmm.
Because it seems to me that the front three never operate in as a I was going to say tandem, but what as a threesome.
Yeah. A unit, I think, is the word you're
Well, I
looking
think I was
for.
on the
Yeah.
tip of your tongue there. But anyway, nonetheless, not that I have any idea what any of those things are, but um, in the with current parlance that I'm using, football parlance, you know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
I worry about Rasmus Højlund.
Yeah.
I really like Højlund, and I think there's a really good striker in the kid, but he's largely ineffective when he comes on, James, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure his
Yeah.
confidence is not great, but it doesn't seem to me like I was watching a moment in the second half, young Garnacho straight through, and he has a simple square ball to Rashford that if he plays it with his second touch, Rashford straight through on goal, and you can see Garnacho's thought process. I want to get past this last defender, in on goal and shoot.
Yeah.
He realizes by the time he gets to the edge of the box that he's not going to be able to do that. Tries to play a square ball. It's too late. It's cut out. And this
Yep.
is what I'm talking about. Is there, when York and Cole were up front together, they were a pair. Are you
Mm.
operating as a front three where you support each other, or are you all competing with each other? I mean, I think we get that from Ahmad. We saw that early on.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I rate Garnacho really highly, exceptional young talent, and decision making is something that comes with maturity, and it's also something that heavily gets affected by a lack of confidence.
Yep.
But there's going to have to be, to me, some sort of understanding of them playing together rather than competing with each other, because it kind of feels to me they're competing with each other a bit. That is going to be something that Amorim is going to have to solve.
Yes, he is. And in I've watched the sporting team for a long time, and one of the it's a very interesting setup in that respect because it's set up this way, and because there's a lot of talk over Jokeris, obviously over there scoring a lot of goals and like doing an amazing job this year, you might get the idea that a system is formulated around funneling everything to the striker for goals and that nobody else is going to score and things like that. But it's really not the case. For most of the time there, his teams have spread the goals around really, really well and everybody gets involved. Because it's a lot of patterns, it's about making a lot of the patterns. I would say that he's a lot more dogmatic, as a system coach than we've had in quite a while. As to your point on, about sticking with something, right, and seeing that style of play that I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and we're going to stick with it, and we're going to suffer even though we're bad at it. And I think that it's a challenge because we'd not scored a lot of goals, and throughout Ten Hag's entire tenure, we really didn't score a lot of goals. We never solved this problem. Beyond that 4 or 5 month stretch where Rashford was scoring, I think, like every game after the World Cup, a few years in his first season. Even then, right after the League Cup final, it ended, and we've not really scored goals consistently since then. It's been a long, long time. And a lot of it is that one, it's personnel and relationships and positions, right? I think it was a little bit makeshift for that first game, but they've got to nail down the positions, right? The positions that they're going to be in consistently, game after game. This is where you're going to play. I'm not saying there won't be flexibility when needed, but that you're here or you're here always, and this is your job in these positions, right? And then that it's the same players, the same relationships, the same consistency, so they can build that, almost telepathic communication, knowing how the other player moves, knowing how they run, knowing how they work, knowing how they do all of that. That's obviously one major aspect, that continuity and consistency. But then it's coaching it. I still feel like one of my biggest gripes has been that we've really not had. I can't tell you how United score goals, right, in the last, or how they create chances over the last couple of years, right? You can't sit there and say, okay, this is their move, their thing that they're going to do that's going to create chances, that's going to score goals. It's 90%. They win the ball, they toss it up the pitch, they're on the run, and we saw that even in that game against Ipswich. They kind of reverted to that a lot. Of in the moment you're talking about, Garnacho gets it on the break, and it's like, that's it. It's like he's on the break and he's one-on-one, and he's either going to pull it off or he's not. And that's most of the chances that we have, where we want to see. I think we need to start seeing a lot more chances created almost regardless of personnel, where it's like, this is the movement, this is the action, this is the thing that's done, and you do it and you accomplish it, and then you see who can actually execute that. And so I think of it kind of the same way in the other areas of the pitch. The same thing, that instructions that Dalot has defensively, there's going to be instructions like that for the attackers, and they've got to get it. And that's my hope anyway, because you take someone like Marcus Rashford, he's been here for a long time. He's not been in a settled team once in all these years. I mean, 6 different managers, 6 different ways of playing, 6 different attacks. Like, what, where are you going to get any kind of patterns out of something like that? If you ask Marcus Rashford today, what is the way that United score goals? He can't tell you that either.
Look, United still score goals more or less the same way. They either rely on the opposition making a mistake that creates the opportunity for them, or it's a piece of individual magic. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So very rarely. I mean, I would have to say that the team, we said this at the start of the podcast, you did, and rightly so, that the goal against Ipswich came from the training ground. So this is one of the few that you see, okay, this is a result of controlling possession, cutting you open with the movement, and coordinated, symmetrical movement that, is designed. That to be fair, it takes time, right? That's
it does, for sure. Yeah.
That's a really hard thing to perfect. But United have still been they've been a counter-attacking team for years, James.
Yes, correct. If we had one identity, it would be that. Yeah.
It's when you get into muscle memory, always kicks in. So when you have a team that's under pressure, especially when they're trying new things, they'll revert back to the thing that they know. So this is just going to take time, and to, when Amory mentioned this, that it was an important point about coaching.
Yeah.
Oh, you're not going to make these people better players, really. What you can do is you can help them make different decisions that can improve their game. They already have the attributes, the assets. So when you talked about Bruno knocking long balls, we can have a system, a team that plays to his strengths. Yeah. And I think it's so that there's different types of movements, so that he's not knocking the ball. This is what United have always had to do, because they can't play through you. So they're waiting to get a high line, utilizing the pace of Garnacho or Rashford over the top, and I'm not going to say it's belligerent, but it's not a difficult skill to perfect in a team, right?
Yeah.
To get, highly coordinated movement in a team that's almost telepathic, that takes repetition. And Amarim's going to need time for that. And when I know we hear a lot of talk about Yorkes and all that there, but Yorkes to me is still a risk. Right?
Yeah.
There's no guarantee
Agreed.
that he would come in and bang the 30
Yep.
goal. I mean, if Marcus Rashford was playing in this Portuguese league, Marcus would be scoring 35 goals a season. I mean, if you went to Sporting Lisbon right now and said, I want to swap off you, Marcus Rashford, they'd bite their arm for it. I know there's a lot of people out there that don't like Marcus and they're going to feel differently. They're entitled to feel how they feel about him as a footballer. That's fine. But I would say the same about Garnacho, about Haaland.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't think he's any better than what United have.
Yeah.
And one of the main reasons why United don't score goals is because of what we just said. I think Yorkes would struggle in the United team for the same reason that the current strikers are struggling.
Agreed.
If Haaland was
100%.
playing for a Sport in Lisbon, I'm certain he'd be a 30 goal a season striker.
Well, Højlund isn't a worse finisher than him. Højlund's an incredible finisher. When he gets a chance, he scores. But
when you're dominating 90% of your games and getting multiple chances per game, you if you're an average or above average striker, you're going to score goals. I mean, Liverpool paid close to 100 million for Darwin Núñez, who's prolific in that league, and he looks miles off in the Premier League.
Yeah, as a scorer, yeah.
So, yeah, as much as I like him. To me, that's still a risky type. I know you need to get Bruno Fernandes from there, and he worked out, but there's been lots of players that haven't.
I think the general take on it is, regardless of the player quality, like I don't think a striker fixes United's problem.
Yeah, the problem
we've had. Deeper. Yeah,
the problems come deeper. Then he said something about Xerxes, which I thought was very interesting. It's something that we've talked about numerous times on this podcast about. And I mentioned this, I think, after the first or second week, that he looks like a guy that isn't desperate to score goals. He's always behind the play. He's languid a bit. He doesn't strike me as someone that's desperate to get in the box and score. And there's been many times where I've seen United attack and create openings, and he is jogging towards the top of the box. You're a striker. You need to get in that box to score goals. Like, why aren't you desperate to get on the end of that? And of course, Marine brings it up and says, Josh has to, show more. I'm paraphrasing here, so I'm not quoting exactly correctly, but he needs to, get in the box with a little bit more intensity.
Yes.
And I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, effectively, that's what he said, and that's correct. And it's also a hallmark of his teams, flooding the box with players who are desperate to get that ball and get it on goal and shoot. And that's a big difference. But I agree. And on the comments on him, I thought was interesting because, you've pointed out here, he made a few comments on individual players. And it's interesting, like, I was thinking about it myself, like, it kind of speaks to the difference in communication. And I'm not trying to go on the past and give a hard time with Ten Hag, but we've had instances with Ten Hag where one comment would blow things up about a player. And there was real problems with certain aspects of commenting on things publicly. But Amarim goes in his post-match interview and comments on, I think, 4 or 5 different players in specificity. And I think that's an interesting thing as a fan to look at, because there's been many times where I haven't wanted the manager to say anything about, the players and all of that. But he also talked about how much he protects the players and guards them and defends them and all that. And I think it's really interesting in that respect to, what his way of going about that, where there was no drama with those comments. I guess there's nobody goes like, huh, something said like that. And I think part of that is the level of ability to communicate in specificity exactly what was going on, to where it takes the blame kind of off the players, because it's like, Dallo, he's doing these things he's been doing for a long time, and he's got to learn this new way of playing and all of that I'm teaching him, and it takes the pressure off of him. But then he comments on 5, 6 other players too, and you think he's not singling anybody out. There's no blame going on here. It's actually just pointing out in specific what is wrong and what we need to improve upon and work on, and and really saying where I need to teach these people more what to do and instruct them. And I found that refreshing, because then the specificity of his answers were really good to hear, where the recognition of the problems, even with players, without it being like this, I don't know. There's just something was different there, where I felt it was handled very well, with
Yeah,
even
there's
with
no doubt
commenting on them.
when you use precise language, that is definitely something that helps with communication. Goes back to what we were saying about expectation of what is required from you.
Yeah,
When you use nebulous language, then it's confusing. And but what I would say slightly on that is, I think Ten Hag in his first season did come out a couple of times and say similar things to Amarim, but
yes,
he was in a position of strength.
correct, yeah,
When you start doing that when you're losing games, then it lands totally different, because
yeah,
players feel, in France, they feel, they feel like they have the ability to hit you back.
yeah,
So they have some reciprocity, because you are not convincing anyone that you're correct by
correct,
what you do on the field.
yep,
If you're winning games of football, Ten Hag had the power to get rid of Ronaldo because he was
yep,
winning games of football. If Ten Hag tried to do that in his second or third season, that would have went very differently.
yes,
So Amarim's in that place right now where he can't put a foot wrong.
yeah,
That Now, that's not to say that that I like what he said, and some of what he's trying to correct are things that Ten Hag was asking United to do, obviously. But I think I'm very encouraged by him. I like his demeanor. I like that he's very approachable. But you can tell he has that little bit of steel to him. That he is protective over his players, and I think that's something that United have really lacked over the years.
yeah,
And I know this from speaking to some players about how they felt the club hasn't protected them, the club hasn't supported them, and that breeds resentment towards your employer.
yeah,
For the environment to breed success, you have to have an organization that protects its people, right?
yep,
Sometimes you deserve legitimate criticism, that's fine, but when you have players being criticized for their clothing or for where they go on holiday during the time off, and the criticism is incorrect, because instead of saying Portland, instead of saying New York, you say Portland. That's fucked up, man. I'm sorry. Like
or
you
Orlando
are you
too. I
are a
mean,
broadcaster.
yeah,
Well, I mean, to me, Gary Neville's a broadcaster.
yeah,
That's a big detail.
yeah, it is,
Maybe if you hadn't left Withenshaw or Bury on your time off, you'd have been a better than an average right back. I'm sorry, like, I mean, just because you did it this way in the early 90s,
yep,
there's nothing analogous about what was going on in the early 90s to how these
correct,
players
yeah,
live today.
yep,
So if a human being, what do we want? We want them to start a wall. Would that
yeah,
make us happy? These players, by Ruben Amorim, were given the permission to do this.
correct, yep,
That's all these players, Rashford and Casemiro, need to worry about. And Gary
correct,
Neville, in my opinion, didn't give an adequate apology. It was sort of a begrudging apology, and the damage was already done. Like,
yep,
to me, if I was Amorim in that first Gary Neville appointment, I'd have ripped the fucking balls of him.
yeah,
I said, the next time you want to come out and criticize players for taking a vacation or a holiday that I authorized, make sure, one, you get your facts right, and make sure, two, if you don't, you amplify it as much as you did your criticism. But don't
yep,
bury a little apology, because the damage is already done. And
yep,
that is unacceptable. So to me, like, Amorim's got to also manage the United talking heads in the media that
yep,
shouldn't, like, I love Roy Keane, but I was listening to him after the game, talking about, I wasn't very impressed, and that you shouldn't be doing this or doing that. Roy's not right about everything.
Yeah, correct.
Sometimes he's wrong about shit. And, Roy Keane liked his parties too. When Roy Keane's sitting there, this is part of what the contradiction that annoys me about Roy Keane. So Roy's talking about, players shouldn't be, going out or doing this or doing this or doing this. But he often tells a story of when he went to manage Sunderland and he said, or Sunderland or Ipswich, you can't remember. And he let the players go out for a drink. He said, everyone has to be back by 2. And the next day he asked his coaches, was everyone back by 2? Sunderland, I'm certain it was. He says, yeah. He goes, we'll never win anything with these players. Because if that was me and I was told to be back by 2, I wouldn't be back to 7 in the morning. So wait a minute, Roy. Which one is it? Which one brings you success? Envelope pushers or those who abide by the rules, by the book?
Yeah.
Because that's a standard you never applied to yourself, and that's a standard you never applied to the teams you managed. I mean, I love him dearly, and I think he's brilliant, but that to me is inconsistent.
Yeah.
And I can go deeper on this because there's other pernicious things. I mean, when was the last time any white player was ridiculed for the clothes he wore? Beckham wore sarong.
Correct. Yeah.
Marcus has to wear certain styles that has to appease people. Oh, you didn't wear the right Levi's. You shouldn't have wore those. You should have wore coat. Fuck you.
Yeah.
If you're at the point where you're criticizing a human being because their fashion doesn't match, then you're completely unreliable in terms of your opinion on this position. And I accept that I am too. But if you get to that point, this is ridiculous. The police, everything these guys do, and then people build up an identity over being their critic, and they'll never give them any credit. And it to me, like that is ridiculous. Anyway, that's another issue.
No, I know. And look, the thing is that we've pushed back a lot on it, especially with regards to Marcus on this podcast. And it's because, as you can see, the moment the door opens for the criticism to go way beyond football into things that don't have nothing to do with it, it happens. It happens every single time, every break, every time there's a crack where someone could stick their foot in and take it beyond just football, it goes there. And that's one of the reasons that, it stick up for him. And the same goes for Casemiro on this too. I mean, the amount of heat the guy's getting for taking his family to Disney World, the inaccurate statements of things like that for taking his family to Disney World on a 5 days off, it's kind of ridiculous. These things are ridiculous and are well beyond what we as United fans should accept from a criticism standpoint, from a media standpoint. These things cannot be allowed and must receive a lot of pushback because it's absolutely absurd. And as fans, I think it's important too that the players feel supported in that aspect as fans, that they're not going to be attacked for who they are as a person and the things that they do as an individual. In these things that are inconsequential to how they're doing on the pitch. I think that matters as well. And it makes one feel like they live in a non-hostile environment is important.
Yeah, look, you're right that we defend Marcus, but it's not just Marcus. I would defend Garnacho, over some of the, ridiculous criticism that he gets off the end. But James, this is also something I've had to learn about myself. I haven't been perfect in the past on stuff like this. And I've looked back on it and realized that, I'm wrong about a lot of things. And to me, when you start, slaughtering people for stuff like this, you may want to start asking yourself, maybe, I'm going too far here. Because players get injured, get rid of this fucking idiot. They're human beings. I mean, no one gets injured on purpose. I understand the frustration, but no one will feel that pain more than the player themselves. I mean, we heard Phil Jones talk about this, so you're not hurting more than the individual themselves. But nonetheless, Andrea Nana, I want to give special mention to, who was, you brought it up earlier, truly exceptional. The crescendo of criticism that was leveled against him last season was at times, beyond control. And I don't see anywhere near the same level of praise or acknowledgement that, Yeah, last season he was poor, but this season he's been world class in my opinion,
Yeah.
and that is always the case. But Nana was exceptional again.
Yep. Yeah, he was, and it's important. Like for goalkeepers, it's important because it's hard. It's easy to pass them by and only notice the bad things because they don't. You know, it's just kind of the nature of the position.
Malacia Shaw back. Good to see
Yeah.
Malacia back. I believe he played in the Huddersfield game behind closed under 21s, I believe.
Yes.
And Shaw obviously just starting to get some semblance of fitness. We hope both of them can stay fit. Important time for both of them to be fit. But it was good to see Shaw get some minutes at the weekend.
Yeah, and and that's sort of the point. You watch him play. That was obviously not a player who looked like he's not trying to play football. But yeah, he was good. I thought he was very good when he came on for Evans. I think that the potential for him to play in the left center back position, where there's less ground to cover, less distances, potentially less stress to put on his body. In terms of the vertical distance going up and down the pitch, because I think those wingback positions require more running than any other position that there is in football at this point in the way that the game has gone. uh, it's good to see, and that shift might be a strong part of hoping that we can keep him healthy this time, and that he can make it on the pitch more regularly. And that adjustment could be good for his career. It's not like it's the first time he's done it. I think he did it a few times under Solskjaer as well as under Ten Hag. But even in that back three, he did it a few times under Solskjaer before, and I think he's quite good at it. He can utilize a lot of his on-ball qualities, things like that, and it was good to see it.
Mazarui, my friend. What a
What a
signing.
player. Incredible. Like,
Did we give Ten Hag credit for signing him?
why not? I mean, he's worked with them before, and obviously approved that signing. Why not? It's a great signing. I mean, he's an incredible player. Cost to value, it's probably the best signing United made in a decade, easily in terms of cost to quality. Just unbelievable in that respect. I mean, he had something like 130 touches and 114 passes in that game. And I think in a back line, playing out of position at right center back, though not at number 10, which I think is a good thing. Playing at right center back.
Oh, you had to get that in. Look at you.
I had to get it in there.
The
Okay.
guy that batters 5-year-olds to toothpastes, sliding a fucking grenade into the door. Look at you. But I would
But he
know why
did.
5-year-olds are
He
fucking
did
white
well.
faces. Oh,
He did well. He did well. And look, I think De Ligt and Evans were shaky in that game. They were players who looked like they didn't quite understand what to do. They were out of position a lot. And I think Mazraoui, conversely, he's got it. There's just a lot to a player like that can be intelligent enough to just figure it out, and he, without him, I think that game would have been really ugly because he performed exceptionally well out of the back line. I think.
so did you hear the part where Amarim said he could play anywhere, TJ?
I know, but he hasn't deployed him at 10, and I don't think he will. And that's what matters. I think that's just high praise, to be fair. No, but look, he's great. He's fantastic. And, I think most everything that's good in that game came through him. A lot of it started through him, including the first goal, right? And,
I'm standing up to Liam Delap. I did, because that was naughty. And Delap
yeah.
went to the back of him and he stood
Yep.
up.
Yep.
And I like to see that, James. I like to see
Yeah,
a
me
bit of
too.
fighting players. Someone pushes you. And I even when I'm coaching kids too, I'm like, don't start it. But if someone's physical with you, you match that aggression. Make sure they
Yeah.
know you're not going anywhere. You make sure they
Yep.
know that if they do something like this, it's not your back they're going to see, it's your face. Stand right in front of them and give it back to them.
Yeah.
And that's something that I like to see an athlete have that competitive edge where don't let anyone bully you. But beyond that aspect, what a signing. Just, there when you think about what people have paid for fullbacks out there to get 12.8 million from Bayern, absolutely magnificent signing. Really, really like him. And I think that know you need to get battered on recruitment, and I've said this before, deservedly so at times, but I don't really think the recruitment this summer was that bad.
No, I think it was
Mazza
good
is
this
a
summer.
fantastic signing. Glimt is, to me, proven to be a good signing. There's still another level in him to me.
And he was 45 million too. It's not an 80 million signing,
Wasn't actually 45, was it not? 35 plus.
Delict was I think 40, 45, but yeah.
All right, and
Still,
then
it's good. Yeah.
I think we'll see what happens with Ugarte. We've seen some good games, some bad games. We don't know yet. I think that the signings that United made this summer, Xerxes is the one. The Xerxes that I saw the first 2 or 3 games is completely.
Yeah.
You can see that his confidence is deeply
Yes.
affected, right? And he's not
Yep.
sure himself where he fits into this team. He's technically a very good player, and he's a type of player, James, that is almost a definition of a system player, where
Yes.
he knows where people are, where these little flicks come off, this comes off, this ball comes off, he knows. And so I think that he suffers when you have a disjointed team, because
Yes.
to utilize his strengths, you need a team that that he understands how players play and the way they attack. And I think there is a much better player in him than what we're seeing.
Agreed.
The question is he someone that can play in an Amorim system? Because Amorim was saying there's players here that were bought for different systems. And I'm wondering, is he someone that can adjust his... Because if you're going to play an Amorim system, you can't play in the position that he plays in. You have to attack. You have to be much higher. So that's one.
And I think the balance too, he might find that he can use him almost like as a Bruno replacement rather than as a striker, in this system where he's like kind of the creator in the front three where he put him. That might be what ends up happening, but it'll take time for him, for sure. That's no question.
Yeah, I do like him, and I like him as a footballer, but I'm just not sure how he works in that system.
Yep.
There was perhaps one criticism, or not criticism, but question mark, was the fact he picked Casemiro and Eriksen both in the middle, where you're looking a bit leggy. And United were getting overrun quite a bit in midfield, which wasn't a massive surprise to me. But were you a bit surprised by the fact that he played Casemiro and Eriksen in the middle?
Yeah, a little bit, because I understand if he doesn't want to play Cobby because of the injury return and the fitness. That makes sense. It's understandable. He didn't take risks there. Mason Mount, who I think could play there, who's very energetic, even if he might be preferred in a forward area, I think could play there. I know why he doesn't necessarily want Bruno there. He kind of described that he wants him closer to the ball, in the front line and the attack rather than deep hitting the long balls for most of the game. So his options really were Casemiro, Eriksen, and Ugarte. And a little surprised he didn't take the risk on Ugarte, because I understand this aspect of not playing right after this long travel from South America. It's been a problem for a while. At the same time, Manuel Ugarte has literally never had an injury in his career. Now, you don't want to start doing that now, but he's a very, very tough player who has shown that he's got to be one of the most robust players there. He corrected that pretty quickly, and I think part of it is this, right? Casemiro and Eriksen in training, I'm sure, look unbeatable. And some of it is just a wake-up call, because the qualities of both of those players are there. That. They're both players who are incredible. They've both performed at extremely high levels throughout their career. They're intelligent. They're technical. They can do everything you want of them. Learning what it looks like at their ages in game, I think he learned pretty quickly what was wrong with that we've seen.
I think one of the things that slightly surprised me a little bit about that exclusion was, obviously we heard Amorim say some players won't start because we haven't had that many training sessions with them and they are not familiar with the system. But Ugarte would be familiar with the system that Amorim wants to play, maybe one of the only ones. But yes, you could be quite right in that it may be a fitness conditional thing. I don't know. But I think I was a tad surprised at that. But nonetheless, very, very optimistic. I think he is an exceptional young coach. Inevitably, there's going to be ups and downs. That's not a team that's going to win every week. And in some sense, it's better to start like this than to get a 5-0 win and then not have all of the issues that you have to address,
Correct. Yeah.
because you've got a January transfer window coming up. You can do something about maybe if there's maybe some ability to do something there in January. If these issues start becoming apparent in February, March, you just nothing you can do.
Yeah.
So I think in some sense it's better to have the full scope of the problem, in front of you and understand what you need to do to fix it. So Bodo Glimt and then Everton this weekend. I would expect United. Those are two games that if they don't win both of them, I'd be really disappointed.
Yep.
The Bodo Glimt game, if Amorim, this is going to sound really stupid, right? This is not going to be an issue with United fans. United fans will give him patience. But you can tell there's a whole bunch of people in the media that if he was to lose against Bodo Glimt, and they would already start on him.
Yep.
Not United fans, but people outside. I mean, you already saw it the weekend, but ridiculous. These are, that Bodo Glimt team beat Porto. United need to win that game. And, of course, need to win at the weekend. Be interesting to see. I think Mainu will probably get some playing time against Bodo Glimt. But quick prediction on those, and then we'll wrap it up.
I think it'll go a lot better. I'm not saying that we won't see a lot of the issues and growing pains in there, but I think the simplicity of players, Luke Shaw being available to start rather than Johnny Evans will be a big difference maker. Ugarte being available to start, potentially Kobbie Mainoo. Harry Maguire was close at the weekend, so if he can get in the team, I think it helps. As he's a leader, he's experienced, he's played a lot of back three as well for England, so he kind of knows the job. In not that it's always the same, but he knows a lot of this. Højlund will have more training sessions to get into the front line. Maybe with an extra center back and Shaw, the other possibility is, things like moving De Ligt to the right, putting Evans in the middle where he's a bit more protected. If we've got to start him and nobody else is ready, and then getting Mazraoui on the wing back and getting Ahmad into the front line. And I think you get, just with some simple adjustments, there'll be a lot more quality in the team. And I think that'll be enough to get the win there, even though I don't think it's going to be like some crazy, blowout type of thing. I think there'll be enough in there to get the win. And I think defensively will be a lot better in the next game, especially the next two, really.
We will see, my friend. Lastly, yes, I'm over on Blue Sky. I have an account over there. You can find me. Have you created any other social media accounts, or are you still solely on?
I think we have one just in case. I haven't decided to want to do it. Honestly, I'm not sure if it's worth the effort yet. I haven't decided. I don't I don't necessarily enjoy posting a lot on social media anyway. So building it up.
Madison account, by any chance? I'm sorry.
I don't know.
I'll edit that out, James.
So I'm not sure if I want to do, to go through building it all up again. And I guess part of it is until and unless the football clubs start moving and players and a lot of that kind of stuff, there's not too much of a point for me. But yeah, it's there. It's held. The account we have is Muppetiers account is there. But you can follow it if you want. I'm not going to post anything anytime soon.
Okay, matey, we will leave it there. Thanks to all of you for downloading the podcast. If you're in America, we wish you nothing but a great Thanksgiving. If you're anywhere else around the world, thank you for listening. Have a wonderful week. Hopefully it's a good week for United, and we will be back next week. All right, folks, take it easy. Cheers, James.
Have a good one. See ya.
Bye.